And tonight on The Wrap, the Boston bomber's fate is revealed. We'll tell you the somewhat surprising result. A new Gallup poll reveals what Americans really feel about when it comes to the big issues. You'll be surprised by those results. And Hillary Clinton pledges to get big money out of political campaigns right after she's done spending nearly $2 billion to get back to the White House. Is she a hypocrite? And George Stephanopoulos apologizes on the air for donating to the Clinton Foundation while ABC takes no action on the matter. Geraldo Rivera, of all people, has a little problem with that. Plus, we pay tribute to the King of Blues, B.B. King. We've got all of that, plus potluck and yay and nay. This is the Daily Wrap, live from New York City. And welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Joe Concha, joined by SiriusXM radio host and Forbes.com columnist. He is my co-host, Rick Unger.
He is.
And to his right, he is the associate editor of HotAir.com. Noah Rothman is back, and I'm sorry, he is actually the assistant online editor at Commentary Magazine.
It's new. It's hours old.
It's hours old.
You're safe.
And finally, to his right, she is a small business guru and a best-selling author. Susan Solovic is back. Welcome, Susan. Looking
Thanks.
nice.
You don't
All
look
right.
Irish.
Let's get right to the Daily Download. And the sentence is death for Boston Marathon bomber Dzhokhar Tsarnaev. He showed no emotion as the sentence was read in Boston federal court. The same jury that found him guilty for the 2013 terror attack took just 14 hours over a span of 3 days to sentence Tsarnaev to death by lethal injection. On Twitter, Sidney Corison, whose mother Celeste lost both legs in the attack, had this to say: "My mother and I think that now he will go away and we will be able to move on. Justice. In his own words, an eye for an eye." Attorney General Loretta Lynch put out this statement, and we quote, "We know all too well that no verdict can heal the souls of those who lost loved ones, nor the minds and bodies of those who suffered life-changing injuries from this cowardly attack. But the ultimate penalty is a fitting punishment for this horrific crime, and we hope that the completion of this prosecution will bring some measure of closure to the victims and their families." At 21, Tsarnaev becomes the youngest person to sit on death row. Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker hopes the sentence can now offer families some closure.
First of all, I want to start by thanking the jury and thanking the judicial system. And I especially want to thank all the families that were affected by this terrible act of terrorism for their fortitude and their persistence in seeing their way all the way through this.
Now, Massachusetts does not have a death penalty, and just last month a poll showed that Boston residents were overwhelmingly against the death penalty for Tsarnaev. According to the Boston Globe, 2 out of 3 say he should have been sentenced to life in prison without parole. So I want to get your take on all this. Do you think the jury, Rick, having a law degree yourself, made the right decision in the death penalty?
Well, there's no right or wrong. I mean, the jury had a choice they could legally make, and they made their choice. I will tell you, it's a choice that absolutely shocked me. I didn't see it coming. We've seen that poll. The people in Boston, not only because maybe they have a more liberal political take, it's also a very heavily Catholic city. I really did not expect these jurors to go in this direction, but they did, and that's what they're allowed to do, and now we will spend a great many years watching appeals unfold.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. It was unanimous, by the way.
It
so
was.
This wasn't like, so in terms of the appeal, is the strategy that, okay, since this trial was held in Boston, in other words, with the Oklahoma City bombing, that trial was held in Denver because they didn't think they get a fair trial in Oklahoma City, but it was held in Boston. Is that what the defense says, that we couldn't get a fair trial here?
It'll be the key. There'll be a number of things that will be appealed. Typical things like judges' instructions and on and on and on. But the big one that they'll really be pursuing is the venue question, that they could not get, as you said, they couldn't get a fair trial in Boston, should never have been there. And by the way, the court that ruled that it could go forward there, it was a 2-to-1 vote. So, you know, that could have gone either way. So yes, look, I mean, we know he's never getting out of jail. That was never a question. I think he'll be on death row for a very long time as these things unfold. And I think you're going to see some interesting things happening in Massachusetts, where the state, as we all know, does not have the death penalties because it was a federal trial that it was possible. There may be some buyer's remorse in the city of Boston. I don't know that it will make any difference whatsoever, but it's going to be interesting to see how they react, because this is probably not what most Bostonians, as much as they wanted to see this guy go away forever. At the same time, we were talking earlier, none of us are going to lose a moment's sleep the night he goes down. So.
Right about that. Susan, do you think because Tsarnaev showed no remorse whatsoever, that the jury saw this and unanimously, as we just mentioned, said he doesn't even care? You see this video here of him flipping the bird to a camera. He doesn't even care about what he did. You know what? He deserves to die.
He doesn't care. And honestly, though, I am in favor of the death penalty, but in this case, he's 21 years old. I would rather see him rot in one of those horrific prisons. What a horrible way to live out the rest of your years. Let him live in that kind of a lifestyle, caged like an animal, instead of giving him death. That's the easy way out.
Easy way out.
Yeah,
That's what I was about
absolutely.
to say.
I agree.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So you're for the death penalty, and if there's anything that deserves the death penalty, it's what he did, and specifically, and I want to remind viewers, by the way, that this brother Tsarnaev, Dzhokhar, is the one that took a knapsack that had a bomb in it and consciously put it next to an 8-year-old kid, a boy who was killed. Obviously, I mean, not to say that you should stick a knapsack next to anybody, but to look down and say, yeah, that's a good place for it.
Well, and honestly,
it's just if that doesn't get you the death penalty, I don't know what.
Well,
does.
the egregious nature of his crime, the people inside that prison have a way of taking care of things on their own.
That's very true.
That's true.
In terms of punishment, lethal injection. Rick brought this up before. It's harder to do lethal injection apparently because the drug.
Well, the drug companies won't make this drug any longer because it only really has one purpose. There's not any money in it for the drug companies, and some of them have issues with it. So.
Interesting. Noah, your thoughts on everything that transpired today?
Well, one of the things that I think kind of gets lost in the discussion of post-sentencing is the fact that we're bringing this up, we're comparing it to the Oklahoma City bombing, the Aurora Theater massacre. One of the things that we're forgetting here is this was an act of Islamist terrorism. This was not a typical mass murder. This was not a typical attack from a domestic terrorist. This was Islamicized, radicalized individuals who nevertheless were in America and were Americans, were executing an act of terrorism in the name of Islamic radicalism. That's something that has taken on a different element in the post 9/11 era, and as a result, I think we're treating this differently, and we probably should be treating it differently than you would a typical criminal act.
It's interesting that you bring it up that way,
it's
and
an
maybe you're about to
interesting
make the same point, Rick,
Go ahead.
that I don't hear many media accounts say Islamic terrorists, right, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, was sentenced to death today. I just hear Dzhokhar Tsarnaev.
No, you
In
don't
other words,
hear a
that
lot of
connection's not
because
made.
now we're having this really the self-serving debate over how we feel about the death penalty, and it really isn't about the nature of this global effort to combat Islamic radicalism. This is just one front in that battle. That has been really lost in this debate.
Because
But I will say this, though. I mean, it's a great point, and you're right. It has been lost. I kind of like that in a way, because not because I think we should forget that this was Islamic terrorism. It was. But I like that our American system of justice doesn't focus on that. We're not going to kill you quicker for that reason than we would kill you for another reason. Justice is justice. I think that speaks very
I don't
well
think
of
it's a
us.
legal argument per se.
I think, though, the fact that we don't point out for what it is, then sort of removes the immediacy of the overall threat in this
Apparently
country.
not, though, because
well, I think it does. I think it's sort of like something happens, and then we all scurry around and say, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, and then 6 months later, it dies down and we go back to our way of doing things. So I think the constant ability to point out and call it what it is important.
Maybe.
Rick, last word. As far as you say, the appeals will take years. Why is that?
It's not a quick system. You have just thousands of cases moving through different levels of the judicial system.
Can't you prioritize this
and
one?
we have
given the
no, you really
symbolism of
can't.
it?
That's not justice either to other people. And we have this Congress that you may have noticed isn't really quick to approve judges when they're appointed, and it matters. You need judges to move things through the system.
Either way, ultimately, you think that he will be put to death.
Hard to say about, you have to see how the appeals go, but I think either way, ultimately, he won't be put to death. That's
Either
my
way, it
own
will not be
opinion.
a comfortable existence.
No.
Coming up next, 2016 hopeful Hillary Clinton is already making promises for her turn in the Oval Office. What is she promising? Back with more in just a moment. And welcome back to the show. On the road to 2016, Hillary Clinton doubles down on campaign finance reform, and Jeb Bush changes his answer again on the Iraq War. Mrs. Clinton says if elected president, she would make sure her Supreme Court nominee would be willing to overturn the 2010 Citizens United ruling. That ruling paved the way, of course, for unlimited donations from corporations and unions. The former Secretary of State made her remarks at a private fundraiser where the more than 200 top donors in attendance. That's the number of people that were there. It was just last month that she raised the prospect of a constitutional amendment.
We need to fix our dysfunctional political system and get unaccountable money out of it once and for all, even if that takes a constitutional amendment.
And while Mrs. Clinton takes aim at the influence of money, she has not distanced herself from the several super PACs that are backing her, or the cast of wealthy donors who are also supporting her campaign. On the Republican side, former Florida Governor Jeb Bush, who's actively considering a 2016 run, pretty sure he's running, has now completely reversed his position on the Iraq War. Earlier this week, Mr. Bush told Fox News that he would have authorized the 2003 invasion of Iraq like his brother. But after days of backlash, where he said he misunderstood Megyn Kelly's question, Mr. Bush addressed the issue at a town hall event in Tempe, Arizona.
So here's the deal. If we're all supposed to answer hypothetical questions, knowing what we know now, what would you have done? I would have not engaged. I would not have gone into Iraq. That's not to say that the world is safer because Saddam Hussein is gone. It is significantly safer.
Bush has repeatedly said he would be his own man if elected president, but he struggled to deal with questions involving George W. Bush's war legacy. But perhaps foreign policy won't look like much of a matter at all in 2016. Take a look at this new Gallup poll. Nearly 90% of voters say the economy will be at the top of their mind as they go to the voting booth. The way Washington, D.C. functions and health policy are tied at 77%, while 74% say terrorism is their chief concern. All right, let's begin with Hillary. She says she wants to overturn Citizens United ruling while taking large private donations, Mr. Unger. So basically what she's saying is, I gotta get a lot of money to get to the White House so I could change the rules on how to get to the White House.
Well, actually, there's two things that she said, and I don't know if you noticed, but she did contradict a bit. If she wants to do this by constitutional amendment, there's no requirement that she be president. Anybody can get started on a constitutional amendment. But I don't think that's what she has in mind, Noah. I think she has another way she wants to do it. I think she wants to be the president to appoint the next justices on the Supreme Court. Citizens United squeaked through on a 5-4 vote. You change one justice, one vote, and you might have 5-4 going the other way, and we may see the demise of Citizens United. You can call it hypocritical, but there's only one way you get to be president in the current environment, and that is if you take all that money, or you let the PACs out there take all of that money. Remember, Citizens United does not mean the candidates can get more money. And you do what you have to do to get to the job. It's my hope that she'll get there, mainly for that reason. I think we're going to see probably 2 Supreme Court justices appointed by the next president. I prefer it be a Democrat.
Noah, you are nodding violently in agreement with Rick. You're saying, boy, you're making a lot of sense. Or is this opposite
That's
day?
never going to happen.
That was my attempt to be very polite, because this drives me absolutely nuts. What we all kind of forget, I think, is that Citizens United was a court case about a movie made about Hillary Clinton. That violated campaign finance laws. You aren't allowed to talk about candidates at a certain point before an election. Well, that used to be the case until the Supreme Court decided that violated the First Amendment. Right. Literally the very First Amendment in the Bill of Rights. So in order for you to address that issue, and that was the issue that was being addressed in this amendment that was submitted to a Democrat-dominated Senate in 2014 and failed. They debated it. The Republicans let you debate it because Republicans want Democrats to talk about how they want to restrict free speech protected in the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights. In order for you to change that law, you have to submit an amendment to the Constitution, pass it with 2/3 of the Congress, and send it to the states for ratification. And there's no other way around that at this particular point. Okay, so how do we get around not amending the Constitution?
No, a court
in order
can,
to
remember,
reverse
you had 4 Supreme Court justices who disagreed with the analysis that it was a violation of the First Amendment. You
Just
have
a
five that
dissent
thought
of the
that
time.
way.
You just
What is
bring-
it
I
that says
understand
just
that.
bring-
I
you just bring
understand
another
that.
case.
But that's what I'm saying, though.
Right.
If you change the composition of the court and another case comes up,
Right.
they can definitely see it a different way, and there's certainly nothing unconstitutional about that. It's how
and
they're
then all the
interpreting it.
candidates will do just like the Clintons have done, and they'll set up their own private foundation, and then they'll funnel the money right through there. I mean, we're talking
That's
about the
not
Clintons.
what anybody's done. Let's not get silly.
Let's talk about the Clintons who raised all that money just so you could have those luxury accommodations in the Lincoln White House bedroom.
Can I say something
Yes.
about that? Because I've heard a few people do that today. Look, I have been, and Joe will tell you,
I'm doing it just for you, Rick. I knew you'd love it.
As hard on Hillary as anybody else about this whole thing. But let's not lose sight of the fact that the Clinton Foundation, even if there was some funny stuff that went on here, and maybe it did, they do an enormous amount of good in the world. And I'm not saying that to defend Hillary. I'm saying that when you throw that stuff out there, especially when it's not accurate, you're taking down something that benefits a lot of people that could use the help. Go after Hillary. Go after Bill. Complain that they
Does
misused
it make you
it.
uncomfortable
I
that,
just-
that the vast majority of donations go to funding the activities of the foundation and in supporting the people who work for the foundation?
If you can find me a charity where that's not true, I'll give them
Those
money
is
myself.
there's that to suggest
Really?
that that's true is
By the way,
really offensive to other charities.
I would. It's true though,
Most
because
charities
I
spend a
actually
fair amount of
track.
money
I track them
on
pretty
charitable
ca-
activity.
They do, but I mean, I would agree with you. 10% is what's going to outside, and too much of it is going. And I've actually not only commented on that, I've written about it. So I do have that
Better
issue.
Business Bureau
But
says
they're still
80%.
doing good work.
I have found a
No doubt,
theme
no doubt.
for this block when it comes to Mr. Unger, and that is a means to an end.
What's the end?
In other words, as long as Hillary can get to the White House, doesn't matter how much money she takes in, she could change the rule.
If she changes
or
the
the
rule,
Clinton
I'd be
Foundation,
happy.
yeah, they may break some rules, but they're doing good things, so that's the important thing. So
Well, no.
we got to go.
Not
Unfortunately,
fair to break the rules.
We got to. Okay. Coming up next, ABC's George Stephanopoulos apologizing for a little donation he made to said Clinton Foundation. We discuss it next. And welcome back to The Wrap, everybody. I'm Joe Concha, along with Rick Unger, Noah Rothman, and Susan Solovic. ABC News anchor George Stephanopoulos now apologizing for not disclosing his donations to the Clinton Foundation. The former top advisor to President Bill Clinton has donated $75,000 to the foundation in recent years. We even have the checks. I have a feeling that's not it. Stephanopoulos now says he should have been more forthcoming.
Those donations were a matter of public record, but I should have made additional disclosures on air when we covered the foundation. And I now believe that directing personal donations to that foundation was a mistake. Even though I made them strictly to support work done to stop the spread of AIDS, help children, and protect the environment in poor countries, I should have gone the extra mile to avoid even the appearance of a conflict. I apologize to all of you for failing to do that.
Even though I was trying to save the world, everybody's blaming me for, The donations are raising questions as to whether the 54-year-old can be impartial in the 2016 presidential race featuring Hillary Clinton. ABC News says it supports the anchor, calling his omission an honest mistake. But on Facebook today, Geraldo Rivera points out ABC wasn't so kind to him when he was in a similar situation. Back in 1985, 30 years ago, Rivera was fired over a small donation made to a friend running for mayor. Geraldo says the firing was really about a falling out with the ABC News president at the time. But he went on to say, and we quote, "The point is ABC treated my undisclosed $200 donation harshly because the network wanted me out for an unrelated reason. Now ABC is bending over backward to minimize and forgive George Stephanopoulos' $75,000 donation to the Clinton Foundation because he is central to the network's recent success. The donations look like he's trying to buy continued access to the family he served so loyally as a political operative in the 1990s. Stephanopoulos has agreed to not have any role in the Republican primary debate ABC News is planned to hold. That's early next year. But the newsman is the latest network anchor to land in hot water recently. NBC News still grappling with the revelation made earlier this year that Brian Williams had embellished a 2003 reported trip he made to Iraq, among many other fabrications and gross exaggerations. Is ABC making the right decision, Rick Unger? Should he have at least been suspended?
Well, first of all, as much as I always like to see Geraldo put himself at the center of every story he can, the logic there was completely faulty. Yeah, he probably should be, but not because he made the donation. Because if it's a problem with him making the donation, I want to know why it's not a problem that Fox News also donated to the Clinton Foundation.
And the Bushes.
And the Bushes did. And by the way, Rupert Murdoch held a fundraiser for Hillary Clinton not all that long ago.
Can I answer your question?
Sure.
It's because he did not disclose.
Didn't disclose. That's
before
exactly
interviewing
right.
the guy who was criticizing
Right.
the Clinton
But
Foundation.
see, when I hear all this, I'm hearing, should he be suspended from, or should he not be involved because he made the donation? No, that's not the problem.
No.
The problem is he didn't disclose the donation, and he should have. He's had ample opportunity. He sat on Jon Stewart a month ago talking about how other people were giving money to the foundation to buy influence, never mentioning that he had done it.
Right.
So, yeah, I got problems with what he did, sure.
Precisely. But if this was just a regular charity, as he said, saving the world, there really wouldn't be an issue here. Because it is such a political institution is what you have a real problem with. And actually, what he said the other day, he said something very different. He suggested when this came out, he gave a statement saying that, well, I thought all my donations were public knowledge, meaning that the implication there is all my colleagues in the journalism business should have been investigating me, and they should have called me on the fact that I never made these disclosures myself.
He said I should have gone the extra mile. The extra mile.
Right,
Because
exactly.
everybody's
So-
looking at your tax
It
return.
really is your fault
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I'm in this hot water because you just weren't doing enough digging.
So do you suspend him if you're running ABC?
I would actually, yes, I would suspend him from campaign coverage, which means you can't cover this 2016
Which is
cycle,
the
which
same
means
as
you're
being-
essentially
But
you're
he
out
hosts,
of the journalism.
He hosts this week on Sundays. It's a Sunday political talk show.
Yeah.
That means he has to remove himself from there altogether.
Precisely.
Okay.
But you can't cover the campaign. So what can you do? I mean, you can serve as the news director if you want.
Or you could, well, he's also co-host of Good Morning America. So
Right.
still continue to do
So
that
you
because
can do
it's
puppy
mostly
stories in
fluff.
the morning. Yeah, that's
exactly. Susan, you were once an ABC News contributor. Everybody remembers this.
I was,
Did you
yes,
ever
indeed.
encounter Mr. Stephanopoulos in the halls of
I
ABC?
certainly did, and this does not surprise me at all. I was actually on the set. He was getting off the set. I walked over to him, being the friendly little girl from Missouri. I stuck out my hand, introduced myself, said, we chatted for a little bit. Afterwards, the security guard came over and yelled at me and explained that you do not speak to Mr. Stephanopoulos unless he speaks to you. And I thought, really?
Really?
So the next week when I saw him at the GMA studios, I walked down the hall. He was walking the other way. I said, hey, George, how you doing? Hey, sorry I talked to you the other day. I didn't know I wasn't supposed to. I mean, after all, who does he think he is? But, for getting $75,000, just, whoops, it slipped my mind, an honest mistake. I've been on boards, Joe, and I have to say, even small little boards of directors, you have got to disclose anything that might even give the essence of a conflict or something that might be improper.
Absolutely.
And he should know that better than anyone.
And you know what he should have done? Very simple thing. Donate to a Bush charity. Right? This is before.
Right.
Just so you could say, all right, yeah, I am trying to save the world through various foundations that, oh, by the way, are held by
Right.
GOP and
Also,
Democrat.
keep
We
in
got to
mind,
go. I'm sorry.
no
Coming
one
up
knew it
next, a
would blow up
new
like that.
bill on food stamps. You won't believe it. Come back. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap. The State Assembly in Wisconsin has passed a Republican-sponsored bill that limits the kinds of foods food stamp recipients can buy. Get this. The bill that passed 60-35 and even goes so far as limiting how much can be spent on junk food, instead of asking recipients to spend at least 2/3 of their monthly stipend to purchase more nutritional, natural foods like meats and fresh fruits and vegetables. On the flip side, food stamp recipients will not be allowed to use their benefits on pricier luxury items like crab and lobster, which Rick and I will be grabbing a little bit later.
Deal breaker for me, baby.
Absolutely. Whether it's for recipients' health or not, to stop abuse of the food stamp program, can lawmakers dictate what recipients spend their monthly benefits on, Mr. Rothman?
No, they shouldn't. This is absurd micromanagement. This is not the government's business. It's not any government's business. They shouldn't. If you're providing benefits, you're providing welfare benefits for individuals who can't support themselves. You should allow them to maximize those benefits by making their own choices. That doesn't necessarily mean using your EBT card at a strip club per se. I'm okay with limiting the amount of places where you can
Do they
take out
take
money.
EBT strip?
Yeah.
They had to make that illegal.
Used to.
They had to
It's
make that illegal.
now. Yeah.
And that's something. But to suggest what you can and can't consume, what you can and can't put in your body or your children's bodies, is not the place of the government, any government.
I have to
Susan?
strongly disagree with you on that because I grew up in the sticks in rural Missouri. I watched people go into the grocery store. They would load up with chips and junk food and all that, and their kids are walking around and they're overweight and they're dirty. And I'm looking at this thinking, how in the world? Well, they're not well cared for. So it's an important part of it. You have to eat clean. So, but I think they're not getting the nutrition they need. They go to school. They're not well nourished. I mean, it's a vicious cycle, and then you just see it repeated over and over and over again.
Rick?
Well, I'll tell you what, I can actually buy both of their arguments. Where I have some trouble is, let's be consistent. If you want to regulate what these people are allowed to use their food stamps for,
What do you mean, these people?
I mean these people.
Okay, no, I'm just saying, in today's PC environment, you can't say these people about
Since
anything.
when have I
Don't call them by their
Malnourished.
first names.
Dirty.
Since when?
Go ahead.
If you want to regulate what little Susie can eat, how's that?
That was sexist.
Then don't turn around and complain when liberals try and do something similar, and you say, "Oh, it's the nanny state." It's the nanny state if you're going to regulate what they're eating. Conversely, I can see the argument for if we're going to support those people, we all end up better off if they're eating healthy food because then their health will be better. We won't end up paying for their health.
Healthy food is expensive.
So it is. You're right. You're exactly right. But if you're gonna do that, then don't get so crazy with the other side when they want to do something that's about healthy food and they don't want people drinking, gallons of soda.
See, I can't believe I'm going to say this, Rick, but you and I are going to agree on something here.
Yeah,
And
one or the other.
I don't have a problem with regulating that people need to eat healthier. I mean, look what has happened to our health care cost in this country.
Right.
We have more obesity here than any country in the world. I mean, yes, we should do something. If people aren't smart enough to do it for themselves, we should do something.
That's just me and Joe bringing up the averages
Right.
because we've been eating way too much.
That's true.
All that junk food.
Yeah.
With the shirt off, I look like the Stanley Cup lately. The winter is so horrible around here, you couldn't exercise outside. So I literally gained 15 pounds, but it's been coming off lately. Let me ask you this then,
All right.
because I think you lean somewhat right.
I do.
What do you think of Michelle Obama's lunch program then?
Well, that's ridiculous. I don't like it. It hasn't worked.
Doesn't that contradict, though, what you're saying?
No, I think that her lunch program, it was a lot of rhetoric and not a lot of substance
you'd love
behind
it
it.
if it was Laura Bush's lunch plan. Admit it.
No, I'm sorry, I wouldn't. I would not. It was a lot of hoopla, PR, and it had no substance behind it.
Well, they were regulating somewhat what kids
I know.
ate in
Somewhat,
schools,
yeah.
right? So if we can regulate that, and you agree,
Right.
but I need you,
Right.
not how it performed, but do you agree with the concept of it?
The concept of it, yes, I'll agree with the concept of it. You can't have kids, with the soda machines and the candy bars and eating, junk in the school. That might be the only nutritious meal they get. So yes, I think we should be putting some
So
parameters
isn't that
on
an
it.
argument for bigger government then?
That's not bigger government necessarily. It is some standards and some common sense. So let the school districts, let the states play it out, not the federal government. But you've got to have some standards to live by.
Noah?
I think there's something to be said for the fact that we're talking about public school systems, and that's an environment that is fundamentally federally funded, or state funded at the very least.
Aren't food stamps funded? by
Yeah,
the
they are,
government?
but you can't rescue everybody from their own bad choices. After a certain point, you can take the hard edges off things. You can't bubble wrap the entire universe. After a while, somebody has to make their own decent choices in life, and whether or not they're going to buy vegetables or they're going to buy chips and Mountain Dew is a decision that they're making financially. It's not necessarily because they're irresponsible. It's because they're maximizing their own benefits.
Rick, last word?
What's unfortunate is that we see the legislature in Wisconsin trying to regulate what they eat, and they completely miss the real problem, which is people going in with their food stamps into Walmart, buying milk, going out into the parking lot, emptying the milk out so they can take the bottles back, get cash for the bottles, and buy cigarettes. This might be worth regulating.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, exactly.
That sounds criminal.
I'd love to see the video of that sometime, by the way, because
There
I'm
is
sure
one.
it exists.
There is one. I've seen it.
Coming up next, it's potluck time. Rick and I will share our favorite stories of the day next. This is the Daily Wrap. Do not go anywhere.
Actually, Jeb Bush got in a little trouble. Do you see this? Yesterday, he accidentally told reporters that he is, in fact, running for president, even though he hasn't formally announced it yet. But I think he covers it up pretty well. Take a look.
Is there any way you would have done things differently than your brother?
I'm running for president in 2016, and the focus is going to be about how we, if I run, how do you create high sustained economic growth?
Reporters were like, "You said you're running." He was like, "No hablo inglés."
Jimmy Fallon, welcome back to Daily Wrap. It's potluck time. This is part of the show. We go around the table, share our favorite stories of the day. Today we're going to do something different tonight. We're going to make Rick the head chef. So serve it up.
So I'm going to let Jeb off the hook for that little error because it was a mistake. But I'll tell you what he said yesterday that did kind of get my attention. Speaking in Arizona to a group of people, I think he was anxious to show off his new Apple Watch, right? He took it out and he used the device to remind people that that Apple Watch held a lot of the answers to our healthcare difficulties. Why? Because in 5 years' time, you'd be able to load up enough apps into that watch that it would monitor your health, it would give you all this information, and it would pave the way for a consumer-based healthcare system. Well, it's very nice, but I got to tell you something, Governor. I once fought cancer, and you know what? There's no app for that. There's no app for that. My new Apple Watch, if I were to get one, is not going to help me when I have to go to my chemotherapy sessions. So the point that I'm trying to bring to everybody's attention is something that's constantly missed. Here we are facing next week a decision by the United States Supreme Court which may bring an end to these subsidies that are provided to those who qualify them to get their Obamacare insurance. Now, if that happens, nobody knows what's going to happen next, because while the opponents of Obamacare, certainly including Governor Bush, who, by the way, made a point of saying that Apple Watch was going to make it so much easier than the complicated system we have under Obamacare, that we have nothing ready to go. Why? Because the opponents of Obamacare love to complain. They love to take votes to get rid of it, to repeal it, revoke it, redo it, but they haven't given us a plan that honestly addresses the issues that have to be addressed. So my challenge to these people is as follows. If you want to complain about Obamacare, it's okay, man. That's the way our system works. But I think the time has come that when you're down to talking about how Apple Watches will save our healthcare system, maybe it's time to put up or shut up.
Noah, a reaction to... Do you have an Apple Watch, I think is the first
I don't, and I
question
resent
look at.
being forced to get one.
I'm not getting one.
I certainly don't want to have to wear a watch in order to just make sure that my blood sugar is okay. That's, I'm watchless. I enjoy not having a watch.
Let me ask the question this way instead. This was a very bad week for Jeb Bush. I think we could all agree. And it seems like there's this caricature that's already being formed, that he is just another version of his brother. Like, he's supposed to be the smarter one and the one that can think on his feet faster and the more articulate one. And it felt like I was watching a replay of George W. Bush, except he is actually a version that isn't even as likable as at least George W. Bush was, which even his opponents would say George W. Bush is a very likable guy. So it seems like he's trying to run a presidential campaign that is predicated on not making his brother look bad. Can he walk that line where, like, he's going to have to criticize him at some points because he's going to be running against him just as much as his opponent, and it seems like he doesn't know how to do that.
He's actually been rehabilitating his brother in private in pretty interesting fashions, really wrapping his arms around his brother. And initially that's what we thought we were witnessing when he was saying that I would have gone into Iraq regardless of what we know now. It seemed like he was in the midst of a rehabilitation process. That seems to have been fading. One of the lessons that Jeb Bush should be taking from his brother, but he's not, is how he approached the primary process, 1999 to 2000. There really wasn't very much competition to be had because the Bush machine, as it were, really snapped up all the money, snapped up all the endorsements very
McCain
early
still
on.
almost beat him, though.
McCain did very well. I think he won New Hampshire, I believe,
did.
right? Yeah. But that was because he had voter support, and there was some frustrations with Bush in the primary. But Jeb Bush is facing a much broader field, a much better funded field, a more diverse field, and he's facing Bush fatigue, which I don't think he's really fully taking stock of. For him to really distance himself from his brother like he has and jeopardize all that support that he's amassed from just having the Bush name and the Bush machine behind him, it really doesn't seem like a good strategy for the longevity of the campaign.
Yeah, and it seems to be hurting him. He's at the top of the polls, so to speak, now, but we're so early, and with all the money he has and the name recognition, he should be doing better. Anyway, we only have, unfortunately, about 45 seconds, but this won't take long, people. So Tom Brady is appealing his suspension by the NFL. NFL is going to sit him for 4 games. That's the equivalent of 40 games in Major League Baseball. In other words, a quarter of the season. And here's why I think Brady will at least only get 2 games, and the whole thing may be wiped out altogether. We still don't know that he ordered any ball boys to deflate the balls. Did they deflate the balls? Yes. Did the order come directly from him? I have never seen that. Powerful people have proxies. They have people to do things for them. And I could see it being, Tom likes the ball soft, take care of it, I don't want to know about it. But did Tom actually order it? We don't have that evidence, and that's why I think he gets off. Anyway, yay or nay when we come back. This is the Daily Wrap. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap. That was legendary blues musician B.B. King, passed away last night in Las Vegas. The King of Blues was 89 years old. Lucille, his guitar, he had many of them, is a widow tonight. Okay, Rick, just a quick reflection on B.B. King. I know you.
Yeah, as a blues fan, I'm certainly a very big B.B. King fan. You know, what I always credit him for is he was the first and certainly the most successful to marry Delta blues, which is traditional American blues, with big city blues. He really, nobody had done that before B.B. King. He brought that Chicago blues style in to what he had learned growing up. He grew up in Mississippi. He worked in the cotton fields, and he learned the blues there. You probably couldn't find 4 other guitarists who were as good as B.B. King, and the ones that were, people like Eric Clapton, Buddy Guy, they were all influenced heavily by him. It's a great, great, great loss. He toured more than anybody. He holds the record in 1950-something. He did 375 dates in 1 year. Wow. Nobody on record has ever done that before. Amazing musician, amazing artist, and the world is not as good without him.
And he will be missed. So, okay, it's time for our yay and nay. First up, comedian Bill Cosby finally speaking out to ABC's Good Morning America about sexual assault allegations against him, saying kids should separate his advice from the alleged assault charges directed at him. The 77-year-old didn't directly address the claims, but did say, and we quote, "I have been in this business 52 years. I've never seen anything like this. And reality is the situation, and I can't speak." When asked about his legacy, the former Cosby Show dad didn't seem too worried, saying he has a lot of plans for future projects. More of the interview will air tonight on Nightline. Cosby has never been criminally charged, but he also hasn't said much about the charges either. So, Susan, can he recover from this, yay or nay?
I think he can, honestly. As you said, no criminal charges. This is a little bit of a he said, she said. I mean, I'm always quick to defend women, but we've gone so many years before these women have raised their hand and said anything and complained. He has been such a good role model. He has such a good message for these children. That's what we should concentrate on. And you know what? If it plays out and there is civil penalties placed on him, then he should pay the price for that. But let that play out in the courts.
No criminal charges, but court of public opinion doesn't look too good right now.
Yeah, I hate the court of public opinion. But it's true. I mean, it is he said, she said, but it's not. It's he said, they said. And you could suggest that maybe 1 or 2 or even 10 women coming out with the exact same story, the exact same allegations. Maybe they all coordinated, or maybe they're all in the same place. But 20 women, 20 plus women, it's
40.
Smoke, there's fire
40
kind of
women,
thing.
you have to
Rick,
suspend
quickly.
this.
He will never, ever be rehabilitated. He's an entertainer. The court of public opinion is all that mattered. And I think we did a great job translating what he said today, because it was absolute gibberish. I couldn't understand a word of it.
Yeah, nay as well. No one's going to take a chance on him, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective. In the extended online version of Thursday night's Daily Show interview between Jon Stewart and Reza Islan, the religious scholar hinted at the idea that Fox News has played a major role in the American media's overhyping of Islamic terror. While Islan said American media is in general to blame, and we never directly mention Fox News by name, it's clearly from other interviews he's done where he stands. Is Fox responsible for spreading Islamic fear, yay or nay, Noah Rothman?
Nay, it's so obnoxious. The fact that Fox News has noticed that there's a global Islamic war going on, and that there's a brutality every day, and we're fighting literally a caliphate in the Middle East, it's not Fox's fault that it's being aware of that fact.
We're almost out of time. yay or nay quickly.
Well, it's not Fox News' fault, absolutely not, but it's good publicity for Fox. My gosh, that's the second time this week they've gotten punched around for something.
That's true.
It's just not that simple. There's more to it than that.
There is some nuance, that's true. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. Panel, great job as usual. We appreciate it. And I'm Joe Contra reminding you it has now been 25 days since Hillary Clinton has answered a question from the press. Newsmax Prime with J.D. Hayworth is next. Have a great weekend, everybody.